episode. Hello students, welcome to class. This is our first class on the course Introduction to Conflict Resolution Processes 1, and our topic for today is understanding the concept conflict. I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting topic. So let's get to class. So our first topic is understanding the concept conflict. We have three objectives, and the first is to define conflict. The second is to know the different types of conflicts, and the last is to identify the phases of conflicts. Conflict is a normal, natural, and inevitable phenomenon in any interactive situation of human life. That is to say, there is nothing abnormal about conflict. As far as humans are relating on a daily basis, conflict will definitely arise. So let us look at some words that depict what conflict is. So conflict is derived from the Latin word confligere, meaning to strike together. And conflict can also mean a fight, or struggle, or battle, clash, contention, confrontation, a controversy or quarrel, incompatibility, to be in opposition or hostility, to contend, or to be at variance. As humans, we have been in one of these situations or more than one of these situations at one point or the other in our lives. It's either we've been involved in a fight, or we are in the middle of a controversy, or we've been in opposition to others, or be at variance with others. So this, as human, all these words that are depicted by conflict, every human being on the face of the earth has been in one situation of conflict or the other, because no man is a saint. If we were saints, there would not be conflict in the first place, and there would not be need for conflict resolution processes. The focus of all the writers are only on conflict between two people, between groups, two individuals, amongst people, amongst groups. So let's review it once again. As defined by Diesel et al., they define conflict as between people. And Ojo also defined it between two or more opposing individuals or parties. Then the last definition by Mojoku for this video, he defined it as among groups. So I observed that several definitions of conflict has always been focused on the conflict between two or more persons or groups. But there is a particular type of conflict that has been omitted in most definitions of conflict, and that is conflict affecting an individual. This conflict affecting an individual is called a dilemma, and it can be defined as inability of an individual to take a decision or make a choice from variety of options. So for us to better understand what conflict is, can we just take a few moments to take a closer look at this photo of a conflict situation? And you can see from what can be observed in this photo, you see a lot of people outside. At the background, you can see fire burning. And this type of a scene is a situation for crime to occur. Crime occurs in situations like this. People are molested, people are robbed, people can be killed. A lot of evil things happen in situations like this. Hooligans, take advantages of things like this to commit crimes. So let us also look at the second picture. What can you see in the picture? We can see a lot of destructions. Can you see cars burned? Can you see businesses burned? The police are there trying to, put a form of control on the situation. So this is also, an after scene of a conflict situation. Businesses are destroyed, livelihoods are destroyed. So let's look at this third photo. Can you see what is happening here? This is also a conflict situation. Conflict generates what we call internally displaced persons. These are people who normally had their own community, they had their own way of life, and everything is disrupted as a result of the conflict. As you can observe in the photo, you see people, women carrying their life worth, people carrying their life worth on their heads, women holding their children, running for their life, running to where I don't know, probably the next community where they can be safe. So you see, this is another dangerous consequence of conflict. And aside from this, there are several consequences of conflict, like hasten or cause a lot. So let's look at the last picture for this video. You can see from the video, a young man is being carried on the shoulder by his friends, and you can see that he has been fatally wounded. He is dead. This is a conflict. You can see from behind that there is a conflict situation going on. So you see, conflict, also give rise to death occur during a conflict situation. People, even innocent bystander are killed, by stray bullets. So conflict has a violent conflict has a lot of negative consequences. So looking at the definitions of the conflict scenes above that we have just watched, the photos, then, and the conflict as defined by those our other scholars. So I want us to now make an attempt to come up with a more robust definition of what conflict is. So I'm going to make an attempt and define conflict in my own words. And I will define conflict now as inability of an individual to take a decision or make a choice from variety of options, and or disagreement between two or more persons or groups over incompatible views, interests, values, ideologies, which, if not resolved, can lead to violent destructions and ultimately death. You can see from my own definition of what conflict is, I've been able to include conflict as affecting an individual. I also was able to incorporate conflict between two or more persons. I was also able to identify the causes of conflict as well as the consequences of conflict. So I would advise as of students of conflict, peace and conflict resolution, to make an attempt to define conflict in your own words. So our next objective now is to, identify the types of conflict that we have. And the first on the list is intrapersonal conflict, and it is the conflict that is within an individual. This type of conflict is psychological sometimes, and when it's a conflict where a person is at a crossroad, is faced with indecision. The person doesn't know what step to take again to move on in life. For example, now somebody may be so blessed, he has like three or suitors asking for a hand in marriage, in marriage, and the first suitor, the person is well to do, he works in an international organization, and he hands well, but he's very proud. And the second person also, works in a reasonable, good, institution or organization, but is also a little proud. But the last person is just a graduate without work, but the person loves you and the person respects you. So you are at a crossroad. Who should I pick? Should I pick the rich one, and damn the consequence, or should I stick with the person who loves me and respects me? So these are one of the many situations that we find ourselves in life. And one particular thing about this intrapersonal conflict is that it can lead to depression, and it can also lead to madness, and finally it can lead to suicide. You see some people just committing suicide over what you cannot even explain, but to them it's huge. At that point they have lost hope, they cannot move on in life, and the only way out is to commit suicide. So you see that intrapersonal conflict is also a major type of conflict. Now let us look at the second type of conflict, which is interpersonal conflict. That is conflict between two or more persons. That is conflict that occurs probably with you and your siblings, between you and your peers, between you and your neighbors. So all this type of conflict falls under interpersonal conflict. Another type of conflict we are going to look at is intergroup conflict. Intergroup conflict, occurs within members of the same group, and they are called in-group conflict. This is like, for example, we have the PDP, political party in Nigeria, and we had at a point two factions, and some people are aligning, behind a chairman, while some other were aligning behind another chairman. So that is an example of an intra-group conflict situation. So the next type of conflict we are going to look at is intergroup conflict. That is conflict between groups. For instance, the APC group against the PDP group in Nigeria, political party. We also have Muslims and Christians, Muslims against Muslim, fighting between each other, and Muslim against Christian, all those type of conflicts are under intergroup conflict. And example of such conflicts in Nigeria is the conflict between the Muslims and Christians in Kaduna State of Nigeria. And you see that both groups are fighting for the soul of Kaduna State. Also, example of another type of conflict is national conflict, which is conflict within a nation. That means this conflict occurs within the border of a nation. Example is that there was the civil war that occurred in Nigeria in the 60s. And then we also have many conflicts like that are even currently going on, like Tiv-Jukun conflict in Benue axis. So these are examples of national conflicts. We also have what is called international conflict. That means this conflict occurs between two or more nations. So that means it goes across the border of a country. So example we can draw of is the conflict between Ukraine and Russia over Crimea in 2014, when Russia just went and annexed Crimea, which was part of Ukraine, a territory under Ukraine. So we see a lot of conflict like that. Another example that we can draw of is the dispute between Nigeria and Cameroon over Bakassi Peninsula, which was finally awarded to Cameroon by the International Court of Justice. So, but you may ask this question. I don't think that types of conflict is restricted to only these two. Okay, what about religious conflict? What about territorial conflict? What about host and settlers conflict? what I want you to understand that all those types of conflicts we still find expressions under one or more of these types of conflicts that I've listed. For example, let's just take religious conflict as an example. Religious conflict can happen as an intra-group conflict. That is, look at the Muslims. We have the Sunnis and the Shiites. So religious conflict can still occur as an intra-group conflict. And religious conflict can also occur as intergroup conflict, that is conflict between Christians and Muslims. And can a religious conflict occur within a nation? Sure, it can also within a nation, because these groups can be inside a nation. And religious conflict can also occur at international level. You can see Iran being in opposition with many Arab nations in the Middle East. Which this is the last objective for this lesson, and we will look at the phases of conflict. We are going to look at the first phase, is called prelude to conflict. This involves all the factors which possibly arise if conflict among individuals: lack of coordination, differences in interests, disparity in cultural, religion, and educational background. All are instrumental in giving rise to a conflict. That means, as far as we are from different backgrounds, we don't observe the same religion, our interests are different, conflict is a potential point for conflict to arise. Then the next phase is triggering event. This triggering event is that conflict cannot arise on its own, an event must trigger it. So what are the possible things that can trigger an event? For instance, let's just take an instance in a conventional school and in a class, and the class teacher asks one of the students to please define what conflict is. And the student, fortunately is from the southwest of the country, a Yoruba man to be precise, and he has heavy accent. And we have somebody else in the class who was fortunate enough to have gone to a private nursery school, a private secondary school, and the way he expresses himself is far better than how the Yoruba man can express himself. So when the Yoruba man now stands up to define what conflict is, the privileged person just busted out and started laughing. The Yoruba man will respect me, that will respect the teacher, that okay, teacher is in the class, but I can tell you immediately the class is over, is going to call out the other party. The next phase of conflict is initiation phase. Initiation phase is actually the phase when the conflict has already begun. Now, there is heated arguments, abuses have started, verbal disagreements are all warning signs which indicate that the fight is already on. The next phase is differentiation phase. At this point, the individual will now try to voice out their differences. They will now look at the reason for the conflict. Why are they fighting? At the differentiation phase. The last phase of a conflict is the resolution phase. At this point, parties to conflict have now realized that conflict does not lead to anywhere. They must try to compromise to some extent and resolve the conflict soon. So the resolution phase exploits the various options to resolve the conflict. So which brings us to the core purpose of this course, the conflict resolution processes, that are available. So we have come to the end of the class for today, and let us do a little recap. We have been able to identify what conflict is. We have been able to, know the different types of conflict, as well as identify the phases of conflict. And in the process, we are able to see what causes conflict, and the consequences of conflict. So, but before we leave, I would like to leave you with this word, which says, peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to cope with it. So bye for now. See you soon.